NASA lost track of a loaded weapon in low Earth orbit. It wasn't a missile. It wasn't a rogue satellite. It was a glove. June 3rd, 1965. Astronaut Ed White opens the hatch of Gemini 4 and becomes the first American to leave a spacecraft while orbiting Earth. He's floating 200 miles up, tethered by a 25-foot line that's also feeding him oxygen and carrying his communications back to the capsule. He's got a handheld gas gun to push himself around out there. For 23 minutes, it's the best moment of his life. He tumbles slowly against a black sky, Earth sliding by underneath him at thousands of miles an hour. And when Mission Control finally calls him back inside, he says it's the saddest moment of his life. But here's what almost nobody remembers about that day. Before Ed climbs back through the hatch, he pulls off a spare thermal over glove he no longer needs. And he lets it go. It drifts out the open door. And it just keeps drifting. That glove doesn't fall back to Earth. It doesn't float away slowly like a balloon losing air over a football field. It enters orbit. Real, sustained orbit. The exact same physics that keeps the International Space Station circling the planet right now, 400 kilometers overhead. Which means that glove is now traveling at roughly 17,500 miles an hour. Let that sink in for a second. A soft fabric glove, built for nothing more than keeping one astronaut's hand warm, is suddenly moving faster than a rifle bullet leaves the barrel. Faster than anything you have ever seen with your own eyes. And for the next several weeks, NASA has no way to steer it, no way to retrieve it, and only a rough idea of where it even is at any given moment. Here's the part that should genuinely worry you. At that speed, size stops matching the way your brain wants it to. Mass stops matching the way you'd expect. What actually matters is velocity. Years later, a paint fleck barely the size of Pinhead struck a space shuttle window during a real mission and gouged out a crater 2 millimeters wide and glass engineered to survive the violence of re-entry. Not a rock, not a bolt, a fleck of paint. So picture what a full-size glove could do if its path ever crossed another spacecraft. It isn't soft anymore at 17,000 miles an hour. It's a projectile, an unguided missile with no engine, no fuel, no one flying it, and no way for anyone below to warn you it's coming. Think about it in terms of energy instead of size. A handgun bullet is dangerous because of how fast it's moving, not because of how heavy it is. Now take an object dozens of times heavier than that bullet and multiply its speed by a factor most firearms could never touch. That's the math sitting behind a single drifting glove. It doesn't need to be big to be lethal. It just needs to be fast, and Orbit made sure of that automatically, for free, the second it left White's hand. And this is where most people get the story backwards. They hear something dangerous got loose during Ed White's spacewalk, and they assume it must have been the tether, the long line physically connecting him to the capsule. That's the object that sounds like the threat. That's the one people picture when they imagine a runaway missile in this story. It wasn't the tether. The tether stayed exactly where it belonged for the entire spacewalk. Ed used it to pull himself back toward the capsule once his handheld gun burned through its fuel in the first 3 minutes. NASA brought that tether home intact. It's sitting behind glass at the Smithsonian's Air and Space Museum right now, 23.5 feet of nylon and gold-coated fabric, completely preserved, completely harmless, a museum piece instead of a hazard. The real threat was the object almost nobody was watching. One glove, deliberately released through an open hatch, quietly becoming one of the fastest handmade objects circling the entire planet. For roughly a month, that glove held its orbit. Silent, barely trackable with 1965 era radar and optical tracking. Just a small, empty hand shape tumbling through the dark at orbital velocity, crossing over cities, oceans, and continents roughly every 90 minutes, completely indifferent to anything sharing its path. Nobody could predict exactly where it would be at any given second. Nobody could steer it away from anything it might encounter. If its orbit had ever intersected another spacecraft, even one built with a hardened hull, the results could have been catastrophic. Not because gloves are inherently dangerous objects. Because at orbital speed, almost anything becomes a weapon. This happened years before anyone was systematically cataloging small debris like this. Rocket bodies got tracked. Dead satellites got tracked. A single glove, barely bigger than a dinner plate, mostly just got talked about, joked about, and then quietly forgotten once it burned up. There was no dedicated system yet built to flag soft object, no propulsion, orbital velocity, unknown precise position as the genuine hazard it actually was. That system would take decades, several close calls, and a lot more debris before it caught up to what this glove had already proven. Eventually, atmospheric drag did what NASA's engineers couldn't do from the ground. It slowly bled off the glove's altitude, pulled it lower and lower, and finally burned it up completely on re-entry. It never struck anything. Not this time. But it left something behind that mattered far more than the glove itself ever could. It left the first real proof that low Earth orbit does not care what you release into it. A rock, a bolt, a drop tool, a glove. The moment something starts moving at orbital speed, it becomes a threat to everything else sharing that orbit. And that threat never actually went away. Today, more than 500,000 pieces of debris larger than a marble are being tracked around this planet right now. This second, while you watch this. Dead rocket bodies. Shattered satellite fragments. Loose bolts. Frozen droplets of coolant. All of it moving fast enough to cripple a working spacecraft on contact. Some of it too small to track at all. In a very real sense, every piece traces back to the same lesson learned on June 3rd, 1965, the day one astronaut let go of the glove and nobody on Earth had any way to catch it. So the next time someone talks about space junk like it's a brand new problem, remember where the story actually starts. It didn't start with a satellite or a rocket. It started with something you could hold in one hand, tossed out, an open hatch 200 miles above Earth. If a single glove could become an untraceable, unguided missile back in 1965, ask yourself what's silently crossing paths up there right now, at 17,000 miles an hour, while nobody's watching. Follow for the space stories nobody else is telling you.